Welcome to the ESI Focus, where we delve into a specific sector of the esports industry with special guests. This is the third episode on esports and data, which is presented by esports data platform GRID. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about esports betting, in particular, why data is so crucial to esports betting in general, and also how the developments of data solutions can affect the betting landscape as a whole, just for traditional and also for esports-specific data platforms as well. So for this topic, which is a huge one, I do have GRID's Vice President of Business Development, Mikael Westerling, I believe, and Midnite's Marketing Director, Sujoy Roy. Hopefully, I got those both correct. I do apologize, but thanks for coming on.
Yeah, you got my name right, Sujoy Roy.
Perfect, 100%.
Yeah, it looks like you've got the right people on. You've got the guy from GRID here and someone who uses their data.
I've been practicing those names in the mirror, so I'm very glad that we've managed to get those correct. But now we know your names. Let's talk about you guys in particular. So we'll start off with you, Sujoy. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Midnite as well, and everything in between really as well?
Okay, well, Midnite's a UKGC regulated gambling company, but we specialize in esports. We're kind of unique in that we're a startup esports betting company that has a UK license, which is very unusual. It means we operate in the UK against a lot of competition from regular sports books, which makes an interesting challenge for us. But yeah, we're growing worldwide, and me personally, I've been in esports for a long time, a pro gamer once upon a time, and I've done everything, every job in between, I think, at some point.
Brilliant. And Mikael, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about GRID as well.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, GRID is a data platform focusing on esports, and we have been focusing on really harnessing the digital version of that's available from the data landscape that's existing in the esports space, and being able to extract the official data that is available on the market and making this available to the bookmakers across the world, and also media sites, and showcasing the digital nature of esports. So yeah, it's great to be here. Myself, I've been in iGaming and data for 15 years. I started off in traditional sports, working at collecting data from in the most archaic form, directly from the venue, using a smartphone, telling where the ball was at all times, if there was a free kick in football, etc., etc. And then moving into business development on the data distribution side for traditional sports, noticed that esports was growing a lot, and that it had definitely it was going to be part of the future. I also saw the interest for it from the operators starting to grow a lot, and wanted to join that. I would say hype chain a bit, because I've been a gamer as well, as Sujoy said. Unfortunately, not a pro. I played Cisco and the CS 1.3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever all the versions were. And then Diablo 2. That was my poison when I was a kid.
That's not even esports. Okay.
No,
but fine, I'll let you have that one.
No, that's fine. But that was my addiction to gaming in that sense. And but esports, I mean, from an esports perspective, CS was my game.
So absolutely great. Probably two of the best people that I could have on talking about esports and data. Like, I can't wait to properly dive into the importance of data within esports betting. But before we kind of even touch on that, let's just provide a little bit of context for people who are unaware about the popularity of esports betting, because I believe that really, while esports betting has been going on for quite a few years now, like the pandemic in particular, I would say really emphasized and grew esports betting when there weren't many other betting options out there. So it's a very simple question, and I know it's very open-ended, but genuinely, how popular is esports betting in 2021? And I'll let the floor go to either of you two.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have noticed it as well. I mean, esports has been growing a lot, and especially the main titles in the esports space, like CSGO, Dota, League of Legends. They've been hugely popular, and obviously there was a big spike, as you saw in also from the more standardized books, like regular books where they focused on FIFA, which again, you can then argue if it's an esports or not, but they saw a massive spike in these. And it's growing immensely fast. And then depending on which jurisdiction, there's different games coming up, and there's always new games coming on. There is a growing demand for all these game titles. Some stay, some go, but it's an immense demand for esports, I would say.
Yeah, it's got an interesting history though. It's got a checkered history, and it's kind of part of the reason why some of us are here to do things properly in the right way. Because if there were illegal black market sites using crypto, using skins to gamble, but in the UK particularly, that's my market. We have a very mature gambling market, and people understand the rules. They understand, and we also do the right marketing. We have the right restrictions and safeguards in place. So, but it's not just you might think it's just people who are betting on football that going to put something on Counter-Strike because they've heard of it. But there are some of those people. But we've just seen a massive influx of new bettors who have not placed bets on sports. This is new to them. This is the first time they've seen a sports book. They understand the concept, but it's new to them, this whole gambling operation. And definitely a big part of my audience are new bettors who've never placed a bet on football as well. So we've got this interesting mix. There was a time during the pandemic when all the football stopped, and suddenly there was a big hole in the market waiting for what do we bet on? And esports did fill that gap to some extent because we could carry on online. But I don't think it's quite as dramatic as everyone make out. We were just starting up, so I didn't have year-on-year targets to compare it against. But I don't think the effect was quite as big as everyone said. I think esports gambling is just growing naturally. It's not necessarily because of the pandemic. It's because people are interested in their teams. They're interested in what happens. They're very excited about the result. It's a natural thing for it to be growing. And I think, pandemic or not, it's going to continue.
So I think you're right, Sujoy, and also to add on that. Just to add a little bit on that, I mean, I think that the growth in terms of just to add on that in that sense is basically that a lot of the traditional sports books that now realize that they were behind, basically the pandemic basically helped them to push them in the right direction to actually jump on the train and actually changing their roadmaps, like putting it higher on the agenda. And I think we'll be seeing more and more announcements coming on, like with traditional sports brands looking into the esports market. So definitely in that aspect, I think the pandemic has moved the agenda in the right direction.
I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to go on next, really, because obviously we do want to talk about data and data solutions then. As a result of this kind of growth in esports betting, whether that be natural or through the pandemic, did that have an effect on kind of like the development of esports data solutions? I'll start with you, Mikael, if that's possible, because it surely must have, I would say, accelerated it.
Absolutely. And like also like for traditional sportsbooks looking on what solutions they've had, I think this has been something that's been lacking in the esports betting space for a long time, that you have widgets, you have everything you have in traditional sportsbooks. Like for traditional sports where you have positioning on where the ball is at all times, you have like a proper scoreboard, and even leading esports betting sites didn't have much information to showcase. And I think this has been proving that it's more successful if you have web betting widgets where you're showcasing a lot of information, detailed stats, because the esports crowd is demanding and they want more information to make before they place their bets. So I think this is something that has been improved, and I think the pandemic has obviously improved the timelines on when operators will put this on their roadmaps.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because you need to follow the money sometimes. I've been in esports a long time. I've run events. I know how difficult it is to raise the money to run these things. And gambling comes with its revenue source, its revenue generation. It provides that platform where you can do all this fun stuff. I don't think we really had the opportunity to look into the data as deeply as we ever had, as we do now. And in a way, I kind of think that the gambling part being integrated into events is actually crucial, because otherwise, how do you get all this new stuff happening? And maybe it's a testament to what you're doing, is that now that the market's there, there's an opportunity for this. It's still very young. There's so much more we could do. But the potential is obviously huge for video games.
Yes, definitely. I think it's massive, and I think you take into account, obviously, like you said, when betting data and when data solutions, which betting companies kind of want, increases, that also then increases the possibility for these these data solution companies to expand it into other things. Like, what's the great thing about data is that when you're collecting data and using it and optimizing it, it doesn't just have to apply to betting. It can apply to other things as well, and it really strengthens, I would say, like esports data as a whole as well, which is just as interesting. And Sujoy, I just want you to add on to it a little bit. Then, are you saying that because of the fact of these data solutions increasing, even you from an esports specific betting site has seen these improvements? Because I think the general assumption is that this has been great for the traditional bookmakers because now they've been given these solutions, but actually you're even seeing development in this just from an esports specific side as well.
Well, I think the innovation, we've worked with GRID on some events, and where they've really excelled is to get the betting content into the broadcast where most people are watching. Now that's probably one of the easiest places to be because you can constantly talk, you can constantly put stuff on the screen. And the next step is how do you integrate that onto the platform, which, there's a lot for us to do still. I'd say we've noticed that our customers want more, right? It's what are we offering that's different to a Bet365, which is a default option in the UK for a lot of people. I understand why. They've heard of them, they know them, they trust them, and it's a big book. There's obvious reasons you would go with a regular sports betting company, but what do we offer that's different then? And that's kind of where we need to set ourselves apart as a brand. We are obviously younger, focused on gaming. We understand our audience very much, and our promotions are targeted to gamers. But we need to do more than that, and that's where we need to involve, get the data, use that effectively, give our customers more information, because we know that's the whole experience to our customers is them feeling knowledgeable about the game, feeling like they're engaged with the game. They're following the different threads that are happening throughout it and using that information to bet as well. So, like I say, a long way to go. We can see the lessons, but for someone like us to differentiate ourselves, we need to do this. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And to kind of move on then to talk about data and specifically and data solutions, Mikael, I want to kind of see like how important are developing these data solutions to esports betting success then? And how does this kind of translate to esports betting specifically as well in terms of, the more options then which could be available through that? Is it really crucial to keep developing these solutions right now, especially while, I mind the pump, but the iron is hot kind of way, it's like it's continually developing.
Absolutely, and also making sure that you catch the granularity and build on new features that is cooler, so you can actually see, for example, statistics that you haven't been able to see before, like historical data, so you're able to see what's been in the past and so forth. I think that's crucial, especially with how fast the esports space is developing, and adding new features, knowing on how a new patch is going to affect the game. Something gets changed all the time. You need to be on the top of your game, being able to adjust that. And I mean, adding a second ball in football doesn't happen very often, but that's stuff like that can happen in esports. And then there's a new game popping up, and this is where I think GRID has done a great job in terms of our platform has a game agnostic approach, where regardless of it, what kind of game it is, we see it as the same. A kill is always a kill. And you can translate that into how we build our platform, making sure that once a new game title comes out, it's in a specific genre, and then we can basically add it to that and then add on features as we go. But the very basic commands are there from the start, and then we can just add the more granular commands as we go.
No, that's great. And Sujoy as well, actually, to then add on to that in terms of like adaptability, it is the fact that you probably need more enhanced data and more data solutions than what you would say in traditional sport. We're going to talk about the differences between the two now, but is that adaptability like quite an important point of esports data. Because like I said, we don't have two footballs. Imagine if, suddenly football said we're going to change the rules every 3 months. The posts are going to be 5 times the size or half the size. Like that would change in terms of a betting landscape, everything, because you need then that data to create these odds for it. So is that something that's so important in esports data?
I think it sounds insane when you put it like that,
yeah.
but we're just used to it. We're used to having a patch change everything, and everything you thought you knew is gone now. But that's life in esports. But it's kind of speaks of the nature of the kind of businesses we run. We need to be agile. Things are changing constantly. Lessons we think we know, we're not always sure about. It could go in a different direction. Which game's going to be most popular? We have an idea of what's popular now, but how's Valorant going to do? Things are changing in constant flux all the time, and you have to be agile. That's where we as a small company can benefit, because we can move quickly. We can just suddenly devote all our dev time to a new game, for example. But I also think that that's one of our strengths in this field, is that we can be quick, and when data is available, that's where you innovate. That's where you find new opportunities, things you may not have even thought about. Not just in presentation and education, but also what's the next evolution of this? What kind of other products can you build on top of this? It's when the data's there, which we as games people we know about, then opportunities will keep coming.
Yeah, definitely. And then to kind of talk about the little bit of the data collection side with you, Mikael, like how does that, and I know you were talking about me earlier that you really liked this question about the differences, but from a data collection side, how different is esports betting to traditional sports? Because obviously, I think the main thing is that obviously esports is digital in its nature. So does that make it easier, or does it have its own problems because of that as well?
I think it's a great question. So, I'll start with traditional sports. It's collected manually using scouts, and usually these scouts are young people that are students and have it as an extra job, and they go to a few matches a year. That's basically how I started, as I said, and I did over 100 games a year at one point, which was way too much. It wasn't good football either, but collecting data that way is obviously up a lot to interpretation, and whether a situation is awarding a red card or not, and where you have to alert the markets if it should be a red card or not, or this is obviously creating data irregularities or inconsistencies in terms of how the data is provided. We don't have that problem in esports. There's also no manual collection in esports if you do it properly, where you basically integrate with the servers. There's obviously issues when you are in a fast-paced industry, when you have to adapt to changes when they add something in the game and through a patch. But the digital nature obviously makes it available that everything's there, and you don't have that manual addition to the game, which is from an integrity perspective also adds additional limitations and risks, because obviously if there's something that you can manipulate from a mistake, it can be a mistake that someone has mixed up the teams, for example. That happened unfortunately on a few occasions in the data collection side, where someone went to the wrong field and thought they were scouting the right match, but they were scouting the wrong match, and this obviously had a massive effect on the results. In some cases they were the only source and they were the wrong source, and obviously if you were there as a punter and you had a completely different view, knowing that the score was actually 2-0 and not 0-2, you had a great advantage. And this obviously doesn't happen in esports. So, however, with esports, there are things that you need to be aware of, making sure that you have the fastest data source, official data sources, because basically this is the only way to guarantee that you have the best source available and the fastest source available. And this is from straight deals with the organizations and the publishers.
It's been a bit of a wild west, I think, for a lot of us trying to get data in the past, because you have to go to multiple sources. You know, sometimes you can't work with the direct organizer. Sometimes the game publisher is not open to betting and doesn't want to help you. We've had sort of this weird limbo situation, which is, you can see it's developed a lot already, but go back 5 years, we had nothing.
I think that's a really interesting point as well, because I think as it's grown and as it's developed, I think now, and like as you said, money does talk sometimes, and when probably potential revenues and the kind of added on benefits of actually this could also be used as kind of engagement of obviously as it's done safely, it could be used as fan engagement to kind of add a little bit more to a game for certain people. Like I think now more games developers and esports publishers are actually realizing that and are starting to open up slightly a little bit more, especially when it comes to data. And I think I kind of look at, for example, like Valorant for a little bit, where now I felt like the Valorant kind of esports betting scene has got a little bit better compared to what the League of Legends esports betting scene when it first opened up. It kind of just shows the differences of actually that willingness to kind of at least give a little bit more than what was previously done. Sujoy, I do want to talk about probably one thing. I mentioned it a little bit when I was saying then, integrity. Like, is this why it's so important to make sure that you get the correct data solutions in esports? Because right now, esports betting is still considered quite fresh. So integrity is so important right now, as more than anything, to keep it in that good reputation amongst other people. Because traditional sports to this day has still struggled with breaches of integrity when it comes to kind of making sure that the data is correct in betting.
Yeah, we don't have it so much at this stage. Like I say, it's still a young industry. It's a nascent industry where we're finding out issues, and the volumes aren't outrageous yet. So sometimes you have a problem with the market, but you live with it, right? So I don't think our major issues are data related, because the normal trading algorithms kind of balance that out a lot. And I don't think, maybe we've just not had a big issue with data yet that's caused this. And when it happens, then I'm going to complain about it nonstop. I think the real sort of integrity question around it right now is just people questioning whether this is a real sport because it's so new. People say, "Oh, what do you mean you can bet on Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, all of these things?" We want people to have confidence when they get involved that it's a real match, that the people aren't throwing games. That's kind of the biggest integrity issues we have right now. And it's, we do everything we can to make sure people have confidence in the results. I suppose, we just haven't got to that point where the data has been an issue, but you're right. It will come one day and then it'll become an issue. Thankfully, I don't think it's happened yet. So yeah, it's right now, all of our integrity questions all about just sort of making sure the tournament is sound, that the results are real, that people are playing properly, because otherwise you just ruin the whole experience for our customers, which we don't want.
And Mikael, then, to kind of add on to that, for yourself at GRID, do you kind of make sure that when you're checking tournaments that you want to kind of collect data for and publish data for, and provide to esports betting companies, that it is like due diligence, I believe is how it said, is done, and that you can actually make sure that it's real?
Absolutely. We have stringent checks on all our partners in that sense, make sure that, first of all, it's a credible tournament and that they have everything in place, that they have certain tests we have before we start working with tournament organizers, that they need to be following certain guidelines in terms of in how they provide the data to us, and how which teams are playing is obviously playing a big importance for us. And also there is certain thresholds where we focus on the tournaments, but yes, this is an important aspect. And we're also following a lot of guidance in terms of when there is indications of something going on in terms of liquidity moving in one certain direction when it shouldn't. We have an integrity team monitoring markets and how they change throughout the game. And I think this data will be more and more important as we go along. And it's, as Sujoy said, I think that's a great point, and that's it's incredibly important that we send out the right picture, that this is a market that is like controlled and there is no funny business going on. And this is for how data is extremely important, like knowing when something has gone wrong so we can alert the right people and take note of that in the future.
Yeah, it's one of
Although
those.
I got to say, if it was just a problem with scores or something, our communities are so active that we know about these things instantly. Say if we've settled a bet wrong, like we have 100 people like shouting on Discord. It's like, what happened here? Where's my money?
Yeah,
These things they sort themselves out through an active user base. Actually, a lot of those kind of problems.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's also very interesting is I think as this problem will probably become more prevalent as esports data solutions and kind of esports betting possibilities kind of widen, and you can kind of get to a point where you can bet on some of the more niche kind of things right now, because still right now in the esports betting landscape for the majority of people, obviously I know that some do specific esports bets as well, but for like majority more traditional bookmakers anyway, a lot of it is just score based, map based, who gets the most kills, like the very kind of basic, stats that you can very much easily just check up in an instant. And while it's obviously still good to have automated data, that still helps get this, the betting scene a little bit along, where maybe when like accumulators, start to come in a lot more, or, certain things like, is this person going to pick up this gun, or, things like that, that when there's more specific data which could actually be reached out and collected, that's probably when I would say like integrity does then come more into it, because when you're offering more, you've also got to search for more as well and make sure that it's legit. And I think it's very interesting. Sujoy, though, specifically for you, and I if you can't answer this, that is absolutely fine. But I do really want to know, like, is there any like requirements for like an esports client that differ from a traditional sport client? And do you think there are any differences between the two?
No, there's definitely a difference. We have to set ourselves apart from the sports betting companies, and partly it's from the depth of market is very important. I'm always surprised when customers keep coming back and saying, "Hey, I'd like to bet on this. Actually, I'd like to be able to place a wager on this," and we need to be the people who are there for our gaming customers who are very engaged in the product. I think a non-gaming customer would stick to the simple stuff, right? Who are not going to be interested in the detailed, fine mechanics of the game and the depth of markets you get from that. But yeah, I think we have to offer something different. We have to offer something a bit more specialized to distinguish ourselves. Otherwise, what is the difference? You can't just be cooler colors and a slicker platform. We want to do something a bit more interesting for our customers.
And I think it's very good as well, because I think you kind of have to have these two specific ones, I think, right now, because while obviously it still says sports in the name for both of them, like they are two very different sectors right now. And it's good that traditional bookmakers are offering esports, because for some people that could also be kind of an introduction into even what this is, or at least it normalize it into like a mainstream media. And then for those esports heavy fans, then they also then have the option to go to a more specific website as well. So I think having both of these together and providing, like you said, the correct data for both of these to make sure that both of them are right, I think it's crucial for both the esports specific and for the traditional bookmakers to make sure the data is right. Because if it's not right for the traditional bookmakers, then that also gives esports betting as a whole a bad rep. And then obviously, it definitely needs to be there for the esports specific bookmakers, because that is exactly what the customer kind of wants to bet on.
It's more than just that, though. I think we were talking about where you find innovation, and you need the data to have any kind of innovation. Really, that's where it starts from. And one thing we've got a second product called Cash Mode, where people can bet on themselves, and that's based on API data. But I think we're going to see so much more innovation in this space in terms of not just a bet on A or B. There's going to be more picks, more drafting, more different kind of opportunities to get involved. Because the core part of it is that these are gamers that love esports. They watch it. They watch the live streams. They know the players. They follow them on Twitter. And it's that engagement that you're working on. You're giving them more things to engage with the thing that they love. And yeah, sportsbook isn't the be all end all. I think there's so many more things you can do once you have everything in place.
I completely agree. And also to add on like micro markets, like who's going to get the next headshots and stuff like that. I think this is the things you can do when you have proper data, and which will be really, really, really hard to do without the data. I mean, like who's going to get the next headshot in a grand final on the CS:GO major, for example. I mean, stuff like that is really possible to do. It's a little bit no one's really doing it properly yet, but I think this is definitely what's going to come more and more, like micro markets or heat map betting and so forth. Like which bomb site are they going to use, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's in that real time data that's what enables the whole thing, and it's how gamers operate. It's how we're used to doing. We're used to having at our fingertips so much stuff, a big whole menu of options and things you can do, and data coming at you. It's the nature of our customers, and I think it'll be reflected in the products.
So do you think that when it comes to kind of creating these greater data solutions, the one thing that I think is like a future possibility, and while it is still prevalent now, you've kind of touched on it a little bit, in-play betting, do you think that that's kind of something that's only going to enhance as data solutions become a little bit more? Because right now, obviously, you have like the traditional betting before the game, but in-play betting is something that I think in traditional sports has been quite prevalent now for a few years, or quite a while now anyway. Do you think that that's also one of the main possibilities for the future, is actually having like real-time in-play betting, which is quick, fast on a wide variety of things?
Obviously, we have in play right now, and it's not. It can be so much more, as I'm sure Mikael will have a million things they're working on behind the scenes there. But as you know, I'm a gamer as well. We all are. We know our customers are about that immediate response. It's less so there's a game, Astralis versus someone tomorrow, I'm going to place a bet on it. It's all about, there's a lot more about what you're feeling right now as you're watching the broadcast, as you're enjoying esports. You do it live, and I mean, I think we have. I don't know about the whole market, but in play is a massive part for us, and I think that's where we're going to see the most growth, because that's where you get the engagement with the customers. That's that all important touch point where people are really into what they're doing.
Completely agree, and like data granularity that's available in real time data that's from official sources is obviously insane. You can get the amount of chickens you actually killed on a CS:GO map, for example, if you want that kind of data. I mean, it's not maybe markets I would offer, but it's possible to extract that kind of data. So it just shows the level of granularity you can get from a good data feed in that sense. So, and it enables obviously to build markets, but there also has to be a balance in creating these markets. So you hit the right ones, and which is exciting for the customers.
Yeah, and I think another one that I kind of wanted to touch on, and this is a whole topic in itself. So I obviously, unfortunately, we can't go full into this, but fantasy esports obviously is something that is a lot of people know is very data reliant. Anything which is fantasy, which is basically down to you can get points for a certain amount of steps in a game, or a certain, anything, like fantasy esports and point generation esports in a betting sense, as well as not even just in a fan engagement sense, is so huge. And do you think that as, again, like more and more data is being collected and greater development and more funding is being put into esports betting as well, it's not just about getting these solutions, it's also funding these solutions and making it possible? Do you see that esports, like fantasy betting as well, is also going to skyrocket?
I can take this one. I'm absolutely a believer in fantasy, especially with the granularity that is availability from a proper data feed. And also for certain game types that is maybe not as easy to do from a traditional sports betting side. I'm talking about battle royale titles, for example, which are more suitable actually from a daily fantasy or perspective, because the game's quite slow in the start, and nothing really happens in that sense, and it's a lot to keep track of, and you basically have to have multiple people to actually trade a game. But from a fantasy perspective, that's if you have a proper data source, that is possible. And I think this is where other game genres that maybe aren't as possible from a traditional sports betting perspective or esports betting perspective are now possible. And I think this is where the possibilities are, but definitely also for traditional sports, esports like CS:GO and Dota, I think there are great possibilities with fantasy because it has a different target group. In some people prefer this option with all the intricacies of details of levels on which weapon they're going to use and so forth. It's super interesting, but fans want to, as Sujoy said, get the gratification instantly, and you can't do that of like looking at the stream and then resulting following, because it's going to be too much work basically.
Yeah, no, great. And I think as well, like we're also seeing it, like I said, not particularly just from a betting perspective of fantasy esports, but we're starting to see it a little bit more, especially like League of Legends being one, which has really been trying, I think, push fantasy League of Legends for a while. Some successful than others, I would say, but I think actually being, the fact that these kind of solutions are starting to be developed and are starting to be pushed, and there's loads of other kind of little things which could easily be used to enhance the fan engagement, but then also to provide betting opportunities as well. Well, can we close to the end with this conversation? I'm sorry that I couldn't talk more about fantasy. I could have talked about it for another hour with you guys, if I'm being honest. But to come to like the conclusion of what's happening, where do we see esports betting go? Do you think that there's going to be more solutions, or like having fantasy esports markets, like you said, Sujoy, where you said that there start to be possibilities where you can even kind of bet on yourself and and help see how you perform and everything like that? Or do you see it going the way that there's just going to become more and more markets available, or is it both?
I think, from my point of view, I don't think we want to just be a sportsbook company. I think gaming encompasses so much more than just betting. That's the first obvious product, and it's a very profitable product. It helps you get started for sure. But yeah, I think what we're doing is we've got a platform, a gambling license, and a wallet for our customer, right? And we can do so many things with that. And as a gaming brand, we need to do it differently, because there's no point just replicating sports betting. It's a good way to start because we know it works and we know the regulation is there, the safeguards are there. But that's just the starting point. I genuinely believe that's just the starting point, and where we go from here is really about how we innovate, how we disrupt, how we find new ways to get people interested. Like I say, I've been in esports a hell of a long time. I've seen the issues, and one of them is that esports fans don't like to pay for their broadcast, right? It's just the way we are. We don't particularly like to look at advertising either. We're a difficult bunch of people that are hard to monetize. So what you do is you provide experiences, you provide things, you provide ways for people to get involved with the thing that they love, which is esports, their team, their game, whatever it is. The route to success is to provide them opportunities to do things that they already love, and that's where we're going. Sportsbook is just one element of that. There'll be many more as we go forward.
Yeah, 100%. I think you hit the nail on the head when you were saying like it is kind of like providing experiences now. Like revenue opportunities seem to be going through experience. I mean, how many times when there's a sponsorship deal, and hopefully this does change a little bit, because hopefully people understand that it is just revenue opportunities. But when it's a sponsorship deal and it's like, this is the insert brand name MVP, and then you just see the tweets and it's like, why are you saying it's this MVP? Just call it MVP. It's like, even though they don't really understand that it's just kind of extra revenue, extra brand exposure, where that same brand then could also at the same time say, we're going to do these tournaments, which we're seeing a lot more organizations, a lot more brands starting to do. It's like, we're going to partner with a tournament organizer and we're going to do, here's the insert brand name here, Fortnite event. And then people love it. So, because that's an experience for all. And I think, it does also apply to, like, say, making, I would say, esports betting also an experience as well, and providing that. But also, again, to preface this, doing it in a safe manner, in the correct manner. And as esports betting kind of develops and the more data solutions kind of develop, like you said, it was a bit of a Wild West at the beginning, and now it is starting to, proper, like, professionalize the industry as well more. Mikael, I'll leave the final question to you then. It's like, which esports betting market then do you think will rise in prominence over the next few years?
I will say that I will leave it to the new games that is going to come out. I'm not sure I'm going to pick which game it's going to be, but it's definitely going to be a new game. And I mean, Valorant has been picked by a lot of people as the new game that's going to dominate the industry. And I'm probably going to say they're right based on the other options that are available. But in some jurisdictions, it's going to be another game. And this is what is exciting about esports. You never know which game is going to be big. Is it called mobile esports in Southeast Asia, or is it Call of Duty in the US? Is it Valorant in Europe? I mean, this is the exciting thing. So I'm just going to leave it with multiple options there and not just take one.
Sorry, I do want to chime in. I think we may be surprised by mobile gaming because we're doing some work in South America as well. And outside of, say, Western Europe, you realize how big the mobile gaming market is. And yeah, we're all like, you look quite young, Tom, but we're all going to be old compared to the new influx of customers who operate in a completely different way. So can't take anything for granted. I wouldn't be surprised if a mobile game becomes the number one esports betting target.
Yeah, I agree. Like the one stat which I keep telling people is that the most viewed esports event, excluding Chinese audiences because we can't record them, is the Free Fire World Championships, which is a mainly LATAM, I would say, based mobile game. Which, unless you're from there, you probably haven't heard of as much. It's not very it isn't really known for most of the West. It is very like a Brazilian based kind of game, or an Asian based kind of game as well. So I do think that when you're seeing audiences like that also there, again, it's all about then collecting that data from mobile as opposed to kind of PC is probably also a little bit of a different intricacy in itself. And again, another conversation which could go into, but I agree. I think what's just hearing from both of you guys, I think what's really interesting is that esports data is not just we've done it. We're going to stick with what we've got. We've seen this rise in esports betting and that's it. But there's continuous innovation, whether it be from you, Sujoy, with Midnite in particular, about kind of providing more and even going further than just esports betting. And then also from you, Mikael, it's like, here's more kind of options that we could provide to people. And that doesn't mean that everybody's going to pick those options. Doesn't mean that, a Betfred or a Paddy Power isn't going to, pick all the options available, but having them available, I think, makes the whole landscape healthier.
Spot on.
And so I think we're going to call it there. So thanks a lot, Sujoy. Thanks a lot, Mikael, for actually coming on. I really do appreciate it. If you do want to listen to any more of the episodes of the ESI Focus, which is presented by GRID, we've done fan engagement and we did a deep dive into data as well, which I very much loved. Nitty gritty into data, which is brilliant. Then don't forget to go over to those podcasts, listen to them, watch them. Don't forget to, obviously, if you want to follow Sujoy, obviously at Midnite as well, keep an eye on them. And obviously, with GRID as well, and Mikael, then we appreciate that. I'm pretty sure that they would love to talk to you guys more about esports betting and esports data and the possibilities as well. Sorry, guys, I've just thrown you under the bus then. Hopefully you don't get loads of messages about that then. But I appreciate you guys coming on. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Tom.